The Yorkshire Dales, more than 2,000 square kilometres of rolling hills, colossal peaks and idyllic market towns. It's a popular tourist spot, but beneath the beauty, like disconnected communities facing an uphill struggle with remoteness.
So how do they overcome it? Welcome to Tales from the Dales.
The railways. There's more than 9,000 miles of them in Britain, and we're home to the oldest system in the world. But recently, things have got a bit off track.
Big urban centres like here in Leeds, of course, still see more passengers. But as with most things, the pandemic has changed our relationship with the rails. Passenger numbers have dropped 77% since the start of the pandemic as we adapt to a more remote way of working.
This remote approach is new to those of us in the cities, but it's business as usual in the Yorkshire Dales, where the harsh terrain has made social distancing the norm for centuries. So how have they overcome it?
14 tunnels, 22 viaducts, and a construction problem mile after mile. But just look at the Ribblehead Viaduct. Look at all these stations like settle behind us. The need came because the railways, London to Scotland, there were just two of them, what we now call the East Coast Line and what we now call the West Coast Line, on the back of coal and the population densities of the Midlands. They needed their own route to Scotland, ideally. Otherwise, they were absolutely dependent on other people.
Built in the 1870s by more than 6,000 navvies, it brought a wave of prosperity and communication to regions previously isolated. But getting it built was no easy ride.
It's all cuttings, it's all embankments, it's all viaducts. So it was an absolute nightmare to actually build. And we know that in areas like this, for every mile of railway, 3 navvies died.
But it's no ancient relic. It remains not just a lifeline for those living nearby, but a tourist attraction bringing in people from up and down the country.
I'm Russell. I'm here today as the walk leader for a Friends of Settle Carlisle Railway free guided walk. We don't own a car and haven't owned a car for many years. So the railway is fantastic. It's a very quick way of getting back down south again if you want to go and see friends and family. And we have this, and it's astonishing to think that this is a 25-minute train journey from where we live. In the mornings, you'll get school kids on there. Apart from that, tourists. I mean, the train this morning was full, and I would say 90% of the people on there were leisure travellers.
And it's these tourists that are key to the Dales' future. 150 years ago, they overcame remoteness by building the railway, and today that same line is being used to overcome social isolation, bringing in tourists and affluence to an area that's now just that bit more connected. The Yorkshire Dales, more than 2,000 square kilometres of rolling hills, colossal peaks and idyllic market towns. It's a popular tourist spot, but beneath the beauty, like disconnected communities facing an uphill struggle with remoteness.
So how do they overcome it? Welcome to Tales from the Dales.
"1,700 feet up and miles away from any civilization lies Britain's highest pub. By train, it's 8 miles from the nearest station, and by bus, well, forget about it. Even the roads require a snowplough in winter. With no community to serve, you'd think it couldn't survive, but up here on Tan Hill, it's the remoteness that's attracting people.
There are no transport links from here whatsoever. It's a destination pub, so people have to want to come here. It's not just somewhere that you drive by that you think, oh, we'll pop in one day. You get people from all walks of life and all over the world. You know, it's not just a locals drop-in pub.
While there may be very few locals, it's not the amount of people drinking the pints that's the issue. It's the people pulling them.
A lot of young staff, they might drive, but they might drive their parents' cars. You know, they might not have cars of their own to get up here, so they've got to rely on lifts. You know, but we've even got some staff that they get a bus so far to work and then we pay for a taxi. The furthest one that travels is my sister, who comes from Bridlington. So she's got like a 200-mile trip to come to work.
But it hasn't always been this lonely up here on Tan Hill, so the question is, why is it here?
They used to mine coal up here many years ago, going back as far as the 12th century. And so there would have been miners that would have stayed in cottages just outside the building here. Those mines couldn't compete with the more superior coal that was coming out of the northeast, so the mines closed down. The pub began to fall in disrepair because it didn't have many people coming to it in those days, and the old cottages were eventually pulled down.
It may have laid in ruin in its earlier life, but just last year, this little pub on a Yorkshire moor was broadcast to all corners of the world.
The lock-in at the Tan Hill Inn.
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 The storm Marwyn had been forecast, but we weren't expecting it to be as bad as it actually was. So by 9 o'clock, the snow was falling thick and fast. You could hardly see in front of you outside. So I made the call that, you know, to people I suggested that they call their families and let them know that there's a high chance they might not get home this evening. People slept on sofas, mattresses on the floor, slept in chairs. Everyone was really friendly, got on really well, and there was huge friendships being made from that.
It's no secret that drinks bring us together, but 1,700 feet up, the Tan Hill Inn is showing us that the remoteness is no match for Britain's highest pint. The Yorkshire Dales, more than 2,000 square kilometres of rolling hills, colossal peaks and idyllic market towns. It's a popular tourist spot, but beneath the beauty, lie disconnected communities facing an uphill struggle with remoteness.
So how do they overcome it? Welcome to Tales from the Dales.
This is Grassington in Wharfdale, a market town famed for its stunning riverside walks. It's here for everyone to enjoy, or at least it should be. But how easy is it to enjoy the area if you've got a disability?
You're in the middle of the countryside, so you're going to be over fences, over walls. That's how it is.
I don't think there's much accessibility for disabled people, not really, no.
It is difficult on roads like this, but just got to do the best you can.
This is the case up and down the Dales, and it's making the already remote region even more isolated for those with physical disabilities. So what's the solution?
I'm Debbie North, and I'm the founder of Access the Dales, which is a brand new charity. We launched 2 weeks ago now here at Ravenseat, and it's all about getting people with disabilities out into the countryside by creating hubs of wheelchairs. So what we've tried to do is get different wheelchairs for different locations for different purposes.
After a bout of ill health left Debbie in a wheelchair, she found that she couldn't enjoy the Dales in the ways that she used to. So together with her husband Andy, they raised money for an all-terrain wheelchair for the national park. But recently, tragedy struck.
It was actually this time last year that Andy was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer, and within 8 weeks the cancer had taken him from us. But he wanted me to carry on. He was absolutely adamant that I kept going. I think every friend that came to see him in his last few weeks of life, he said to them, make sure Debs keeps getting out.
And she has. Since raising money for that first wheelchair, Access the Dales now has 14 in different shapes and sizes. But it's not just terrain that's the issue.
While all-terrain wheelchairs might be the key for beating rocky ground and harsh gradients, there's also the problem of stiles and gates like these. So the question is, how do we get around them?
A lot of the people want to get into the walkers' routes, which tend to be public footpaths and therefore tend to be have stiles rather than gates. And it's these physical barriers that are the main problem of walking in the Dales. There are walks, but they're badly promoted. It is very much about communication and putting the message out there. Access the Dales has done that reasonably successfully, and some of the other charities have, but it needs the authorities to actually get the message out there and do a much better job than they're doing at the moment.
While there's clearly some ground to cover in getting the word out, if you're disabled, it's thanks to Debbie that the Dales aren't quite as remote as they once were.